he is so dedicated that I'm sure you're going to see his passion tonight. So I'm very proud of the work he does. So I might as well share them all with you tonight. So without further ado, Mr. Rick Bressler.
Again, my name is Rick Bressler. Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here, so thank you for that. Before I continue and move on, if I would ask all of those who have served, and including the Navy people as well, if you're out there, please stand and be recognized. These are the men and women that keep our country what it is, amazing as it is. Thank you very much. Sunday, November 11th, 2018 is going to mark the 100th anniversary when an armistice between Germany and the Allied nations came into effect, not becoming the legal holiday known as Armistice Day until 1938. Though it was originally intended to honor veterans strictly of World War I, it was eventually changed to Veterans Day in 1954, becoming a day to honor all American veterans, wherever and whenever they served. It is a day to thank the living, remember the fallen, and it's a time for people to reflect on the history of those that served, past and present. Our military history needs to be preserved and maintained in ways that all who served are acknowledged for their sacrifices. We are obligated to remember the stories of the men and women who made it possible for the people of our great nation to enjoy the freedoms we otherwise take for granted. And ironically, in my opinion, that's the very problem. All who served are not remembered. And in many cases, their stories disappear with the passing of each generation. How can we be thankful for what a soldier has done if we don't know about him or her? This very question brings me to the story of Lawrence John Ritter and how he was nearly forgotten. It was kind of like a perfect storm, a series of events that led to his legacy almost being lost. First and foremost, he died in a very remote location, not an easy place for people to get to. It's 7 miles north of Slate Run, out in the middle of nowhere. During a moment of deep sorrow, his mother wasn't thinking clearly. She donated his uniforms and medals to a charitable organization. I have tried to find a way to figure out where those items are today, and I have not been lucky as of yet. However, fortunately, she did keep some of his items like pictures, his diplomas, newspaper articles. However, she placed them all in a box and put them in storage. When his mother died, that very box filled with those memories found a new home in the attic of his youngest sister, Joyce. And after Joyce passed away in 1995, that very same box filled with those memories, loaded with various items that would tell his story, items that would guarantee his rightful place in our known history, found its current home in his niece's attic, again tucked away in a corner, collecting dust. July 12, 1973, a fire destroyed thousands, if not millions, of service records of people who served during World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. So as you can see, there have been a lot of odds stacked against this man. I'd be willing to say that a lot of us have a box in our attic, or a box occupying a shelf somewhere in storage that's been passed down to us from older generations that we've never thought much about or sorted through. And who knows what type of treasures we would find if we opened that box, what memories we might encounter of past generations. And so I ask this, when it comes to the life of Captain Ritter, how many of you have heard about him, his plane crash that took place in Pennsylvania 72 years ago? Has anybody heard of him? Eric? I grew up in this area, and I never knew about it until a year ago. It was a conversation between friends. It was a statement in passing that made Dave Bauer decide to occupy my time, the new guy in the office, with research until he could figure out what else to do with me. And none of us realized at that time that we were about to save the story of an American hero. Originally, I thought maybe I would find a few facts, a unit roster, a newspaper article here and there. But as I continued to dig, I became more fascinated and more curious. It was borderline obsessed at this point. It didn't take long for me to realize just how amazing this man was. And from that point, the plans were initiated to honor him on the anniversary of his death, where he died. I discovered and learned a lot about Lawrence, but there were still gaps that needed to be filled, questions that needed to be answered, and proof that what I theorized was fact. After nearly 2 months of searching, I was very lucky and I actually located his closest living relative, his niece, who is now a very good friend of mine. And I go back to that box we were talking about before. That old box filled with his items that were passed down from a storage place to different attics across 3 generations. His niece dug that box out of her attic. She didn't sort through it, she waited. And she brought it with her the first time we met in person, and together we opened it. And fortunately, about 90% of the contents within that now 72-year-old box were in good condition. And the moment we opened that box in my living room that very night, his nearly forgotten legacy was revealed to us. It turned out that this man was in fact a hero. He was a man that destroyed a Nazi submarine. He was a man that participated in at least 55 missions and had 152 actual combat hours in flight. He was a man that was authorized to several awards, to include the Distinguished Flying Cross. He was a man that survived all of World War II, only to return to the United States and die during a training flight accident, maybe 60 miles from here, on April 26, 1946. After his ashes were spread at the crash site, it was more than 50 years until a memorial was placed where he died to honor him. 50 years. After that, it was another 8 years until there was an article about him in a local publication. And then yet again, another 8 years until I was told to investigate and see what I could find out about this man. So the question was, what would I do with this information? And while working on this, I found a quote by President John F. Kennedy that I would like to share with you. And he said, "As we express our gratitude, we must never forget the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." This is something that really resonates with me when I read it, because I have always expressed my gratitude to our veterans for their service. But it wasn't until I started working at the VFW Veterans Benefits Center and doing my research that I felt I was able to show that gratitude in my actions. For me, that means finding ways to preserve the stories of our veterans, whether that's making copies of what you find and sharing it with people, share what you've learned on social media. We have amazing technology at our fingertips now. It's very easy to put that information out there. And for those that are a little more daring, you might even try to write a book even if you've never authored a book before. And that's actually what I'm in the middle of doing. It also means how much noise can I make and how much attention can I give to these men and women who proudly served. Maybe we could plan a ceremony, which we did very proudly. And that's one of the greatest achievements I've had in my life so far. Or perhaps you could be somebody that attends a dinner honoring veterans and speak about it. And here we are. But it also means how many people will my actions influence to do the same. And on a personal note, it also means for me that I'm now trying to answer the questions I never asked my grandfather about his time in the Army Air Force during World War II. Imagine what I could have known had I asked those very questions, and what I could have shared with my wife or with my children. So tonight, before I finish speaking, I have a challenge for all of you. I challenge all of you to go home and dig out those boxes. I know a lot of you have them. And ask those questions you've always had. And change your words of gratitude into actions that honor and celebrate the men and women who so proudly served in the United States military. Thank you.